Thank you so,
All
okay.
right, here we
Thank you.
go.
Thank you so much for sharing this part of your evening with us. We welcome you to the second session of the ICEC 75th Anniversary Celebration Series. This evening, Dr. Karen Dudek-Brannan's presentation addresses social media is here to stay. Here's what school leaders need to know about it. Dr. Dudek-Brannan grew up in the west suburbs of Chicago and currently lives in Bloomington, Illinois. She began her studies at Illinois State University as an undergraduate student in 1998 and completed her doctoral studies in special education there in 2014. Dr. Dudek-Brannan is a licensed speech language pathologist, a member of CEC and ICEC, and the founder of Dr. Karen LLC. Her company focuses on empowering therapists and educators to design interventions that support language literacy and executive functioning. She produces a podcast called De facto Leaders, where she discusses topics that and does expert interviews related to education reform. Karen also offers professional development for teachers, therapists, and school leaders throughout the year. She currently works with Illinois Department of Children and Family Services as a product manager supporting intact family services. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Karen Dudek in celebration of the 75th anniversary of Illinois Council for Exceptional Children.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Paula, and thank you for everyone for being here. So, yeah, obviously that was my intro and what all I've been doing, but I can give a little bit more context here about why I wanted to talk about social media. I think it would be, as I kind of go through, I can just introduce myself here and just share a little bit about why I wanted to talk about this. So, as Paula said, I did start off my career working in the school systems. I was in the schools about 14 years as an SLP, and I would say, I like to say I was talking about the science of reading before it was cool. So that was kind of my early work in my career. And I was in the school systems when we were figuring out how to move away from the discrepancy model of identifying students with disabilities, and was really involved with the multidisciplinary team. So I've done a lot with obviously the language aspect of speech pathology and where we fit in with how language impacts reading. But also, because my area of expertise is language and executive functioning, I've really been involved with helping the whole team work together, because with those areas, you really can't work in a situation that's very siloed off. And as a result, I really focused a lot on not just that particular area, but also figuring out how to get everyone to work together. So it kind of fits in with the theme today, because a lot of social media is about helping us to connect, helping us to connect with other people, using different technologies to do things that we weren't able to do before, which is great. I can share a whole bunch of different examples of how it's been amazing for me, and some of, allowed me to collaborate with people, not just within, locally in Illinois, but all over the world. But at the same time, it does come with some risks and costs. And there are some downsides to it, probably, as you all know. So that is partly why I wanted to talk about this today. Just some other things about me. As Paula said, I do have all of my degrees from Illinois State University. My bachelor's and my master's are in speech pathology, and my doctorate's in special ed. And I'm able to connect with all kinds of different people on my podcast, De facto Leaders, and I've gotten more involved in ICEC this past year. I did want to just share a couple disclaimers with some of the information that I'm sharing. I do own a company called Dr. Karen LLC, and so I do offer both free and paid resources from that company, and those are available on my website, drkarenspeech.com, and Dr. Karen Dudek-Brannan.com. And that is, again, just my financial disclaimer that I do earn income from some of those resources, and that I also do work for the Department of Children and Family Services. So obviously the views that I'm going to share today are my own and not shared on the behalf of the agency. So just to get into some of the things about social media, I wanted to just start off by just sharing some statistics. So as I said before, I did a lot of work in the schools and realized that there were some needs as far as professional development in my discipline as of speech pathology. But also, as I started to solve one problem, I would realize that there were a lot of different layers of the onion. So what I did was I started off with focusing on how language and how to do language therapy as a speech pathologist. But I realized that this is great that I am working with this pool of people, but then you realize, wow, they really need to be collaborating with other people. So that is when I started to think about how can I use this to train other people. And that is how I got into starting my company, Dr. Karen LLC. And as I was doing that, I was trying to figure out how do I get this information into the hands of other people, because we don't just need this in Illinois, we need it all over the place. And so it's been really interesting because that a tool that I've been able to use to do that is social media. So I have been on the end of being a user of social media, just using things like Facebook to connect with, see what my nieces and nephews are doing, or see what my friend who I, went to high school with, who lives in New York now, I can connect with her and see what's happening with her because of social media. But also I realized that I could use it to get professional development into the hands of a lot of professionals. So I was on the back end trying to figure out how to do that. And so I have actually been on the user side of using it, but also on the creator side, putting content out there. And while it's been really great, there have been things that I've discovered where it makes me think about the way that I use the platform. So I wanted to just share some statistics because I think this is really, it's important because number one, most of us here are probably on social media to some extent, just for personal use, maybe. Maybe some of us use it for professional use. We definitely want to figure out how to use it for CEC to get the information that we have into the hands of more special education professionals. But also, there are a lot of people who in our communities that are using it. We have to think about this from the side of how does this impact our own mental health? How is this impacting the way that we show up for our students? And also, because our students are starting to be on these platforms, we need to think about how this is impacting our students' mental health, because there's been a rise in mental health issues for students in the last 5 to 10 years. And we can definitely look at some of the things that are going on social media and see why some of those things might be happening, and also take some steps to try to mitigate some of those things. But the other thing I wanted to point out, I talked about how does this impact our own mental health, as staff, as people who show up to support students, how is this impacting our students, but also the communities and the caregivers of our students. There are parenting groups are huge online, and all of the information that's being shared in these parent groups isn't always accurate. And also some of the things that are being shared about how the school systems works. Well, some of the posts that get shared that are saying something really negative about the schools in the US tends to do really well on social media, unfortunately, and the information isn't always accurate. So it's good to know where people are going for their information, because a lot of times, back in the day, the community would come to the board meeting and that's how they would interact with their district. But now we have social media. So all of that to be to say that just to share some statistics about how many people are actually on these platforms. So Facebook has, and this is as of last year, Facebook has over 3 billion active users. Instagram has 2 billion. Snapchat has 750 billion monthly active users. Now that I'm looking at that, it might be million. That might be incorrect. But the main thing is I do have the link there on the slide, and my slides are shared in the chat, so you can look at the actual sources where I got some of these stats. But and then other things that people are using online, like YouTube, they can potentially reach 2.5 billion people with their ads every month. So, and I have been on the side of someone doing ads. I have sat on meetings where people have been brainstorming what kind of ads that they're going to put out there. And a lot of the platforms are getting better about how they filter their content and what's allowed on their platforms and what kinds of things that they put out there as far as compliance. But there's a lot of loopholes that people can, they can tweak the language that they say. And so it's definitely something where it's getting better, but we also need to realize that a lot of people have access to these platforms, and the compliance as not always staying on top of what needs to be happening as far as making sure the information is vetted. Is everybody, I wanted to make sure everyone is muted before we go on.
Congratulations.
Okay, can everyone make sure that their microphones are muted?
Uh-huh. Oh. You're living your dream. You're living your dream for the next week.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find out how I can mute. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So, let me just close out here.
No, you're not going to come. You're not going to come pick me up and go hang out. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to keep going. I was just making sure that everyone was muted. So, as far as some of the other platforms, one of the ones that's that's really grown a lot over the last year is TikTok. And this is one that I bring up because there's a lot of users on it, and a lot of the users are very young. And a lot of these platforms will allow people to, they ask you how old you are, but there's not always necessarily it's kind of easy to get around some of those things. And a lot of times parents will allow their kids to have apps before it might be age appropriate. So TikTok is a big one because the content on there, it's very popular with young users. And while they publish their data as far as the number of users, they don't necessarily publish how many users are on there that are under the age of 18. So this is a big one where you hear all kinds of things about things that are trending on TikTok. And this is one where some of the information about different disabilities, mental health, it's huge on TikTok as far as what is trending. But as far as the vetting and the information that's allowed to be on the platform, it tends to be not vetted as high quality as the other platforms. So part of the reason why the platforms work the way that they are is because of how these companies are structured. And I think it's really important that we understand, those of us that are in positions where we are responsible for educating young people, just to have an awareness of how these platforms work and how they're incentivized, just for as even just as you're thinking about your own ideas and some of the groups that you are participating in. There's a ton of professional groups. There are groups for special ed teachers. I'm in a whole bunch of speech pathology groups, a lot of the related service provider groups on Facebook, for example. I mean, and they're huge. And so as we're using these platforms, there's information being put in front of us. It can certainly impact our opinions about things. It can certainly impact our perception of things. I know that sometimes what happens, just for me personally, I'll feel like, there's some confirmation bias that happens. So for example, you're clicking a lot on something, you're seeing a lot of content that's showing the same thing, you feel like everybody thinks this way, but really that might not necessarily be what's happening. So part of the reason that these platforms work the way that they do is because of how they've changed over the last, again, since they've been launched. So Facebook, which is one of the bigger ones, was created in 2004, and they acquired Instagram and WhatsApp in 2012. But what else happened in May 2012 is that Facebook became a publicly traded company. So what happened was that organic reach dropped for people creating online content because more emphasis was placed on advertising. So what that actually means is that if I'm a business owner and I want to share information about products and services, let's say I'm a teacher and I want to create products for teachers pay teachers, and I want to create a Facebook page to promote them. And I have a following and I create a new product and I want to post about it and just, share, maybe it's some kind of some reading tools or something like that. Well, prior to Facebook becoming a publicly traded company, organic reach, meaning if you had a lot of followers, if you posted and you weren't paying for ads, but you had a business page, it would show to a lot of your followers. So if you just had people follow you, it would just show it. And it was also really easy if I have a Facebook page to get a lot of people to follow me that might be interested in speech pathology. So that was pre-2012. But what happened after that is because the company structure changed, they had to report profits to their shareholders and things like that. And when that happened, they had to figure out different ways to generate revenue. So that means that if I'm a business owner and I want to have my followers see a lot of content, or I want to get my information in front of more people on the platform, having just a business page isn't enough. I actually have to pay for ads now. And if I want to have my content seen by a lot of people, I have to use different strategies, and I have to make my content really grab people's attention if Facebook is going to show it to people. So as a result, the people who were creating content online had to change the way that they handled how they created their content, because it got really competitive. So I know that a lot of people who are in the education space that are sharing information with other teachers, for example, a lot of people will go online and they'll create teachers pay teachers products. Most people are doing this ethically, and they're just teachers who they're already creating things for their classroom, and they want to create something and share it with their colleagues online and be able to get it into the hands of other teachers who are just trying to do their jobs. So the majority of people are doing it in a way that is very ethical, but some of the strategies that people have to use when they are online are that they have to make their content really grab people's attention. And as a result, a lot of times I would say there's a smaller pool of people that are doing it in ways that are not super ethical, because saying something that is really polarizing and really controversial is going to get you a lot more clicks than just saying here's some evidence-based reading activities. I mean, that's not something that's going to get a lot of attention, but saying something that is, going to make people mad or angry probably will. So again, there's kind of this smaller group of people who are doing things that are, a little bit sketchy or unethical, that are kind of dominating some of these platforms. So if in order for people like that who are creating information, and this is not just teachers, this is just anybody online, in order for people to figure out how to get their content seen, they have to understand how the algorithm works, and they have to create content that's algorithm friendly. And I would say that nuance is not rewarded on social media. If you say something and you explain the whole context, your posts are not going to get seen by a lot of people. But if you say like a really short, compelling headline that's really punchy, that's more likely to do well. The algorithm will often require creators to do, algorithm friendly content if they want a lot of engagement and views. So if they want a lot of people to share their videos, or if they want the platform to put their content in front of more people, they have to have, quote, good content. Good meaning a lot of people are liking, sharing, and viewing it. So that's how the algorithm rates how good your content is are people clicking on it and are they engaging with it? And the reason that the algorithm works this way is because these platforms they're monetized by ads. So they make money if people who run businesses are spending more money on ads. And people who are spending more money on ads, if they're having more opportunities to get their ads in front of people, then they're going to spend more money, which makes Facebook more money. So Facebook is incentivized to keep people on their platforms. And I'm saying Facebook, but this is how a lot of the other platforms work, is that they want people to spend as much time on their platform as possible, because then they're more likely to be on their platform looking at ads. So it's the content, it's the way that they try to, think about how can I make this more rewarding for the person who is looking at the content, with likes and shares and comments and notifications on your phone. Because again, the more time people spend on the platform, the more likely these platforms will generate revenue through ads, because people are seeing more of them. So I am a person who uses social media ads, and I think I'm one of the ones that is doing it ethically, but I'm also aware of how this works. Again, how does it work? How is good content defined? By engagement. How is engagement defined? By likes, shares, comments, and clicks. So if I say, share a research article that it's factually accurate, but it has a lot of technical language in it, people are sitting there on their couch after work and they're kind of scrolling on their phone. Are they going to be more likely to click on, my doctoral dissertation or something like that? Or are they going to, this is an example of a post that I saw that was getting a lot of engagement. This guy who does not work in the schools said, I think that teachers, instead of making the kids have to get graded, why don't we make the teachers have to get a grade for their work? And everybody just, it turned into this, everybody's commenting and sharing their opinions, and most of the people don't know how the schools work, don't realize that, yes, teachers are evaluated and administrators spend a ton of time evaluating them, and it's a huge time commitment for them. And then administrators have to report to the board and so on. They don't understand how this hierarchy works, but everybody is sharing their opinion on that because people don't like, a lot of people have strong opinions on the way that grading works in the schools. So again, you have accurate information that is comes off across a little dry and boring to some people. And then you have this other information where everybody wants to share their opinion. Well, the second one, people are going to be commenting on it and sharing it. And so that's going to be more likely to show up on people's newsfeed than something else. So again, that's just, it's how it works. And I think just we have to have this awareness of that it changes the way that you think about things, because you are more likely to see those other things. And I find myself all the time thinking, oh my gosh, everybody thinks this about this topic. And it's like, no, those are just the posts that are getting more engagement. It's, then you realize when you're in human with people or in person with people, having real human interactions with them, you realize that people's opinions are a lot more nuanced. So this polarization is something that's happening. And everybody, even if they're not online selling products in professional groups, a lot of people are on social media. They're still consuming this content. They're still in our communities. So, and I think I've alluded to this already, but again, what determines what content you're seeing? Have you ever been scrolling through Facebook and just you were talking about something with your friend earlier that day, and then you see something on your Facebook page and feel like, is Big Brother watching me? What's going on here? So what determines the content that you see are, what have you been liking, clicking, sharing, commenting on? What websites have you visited? There's ways that advertisers, if you're going to a website, they can retarget you. So, and this is something that I do. If people go to my website and they're looking at something, I can then put ads in front of people who visited my website. The reason that the platforms do this is because they want it to be a good experience for people. They want to show people things that they're interested in. So there's some good intentions there, but again, sometimes it does impact the way that you have an experience on that platform. I know that I can just think of times whenever we're vacation planning, we'll be on the website looking at, hiking excursions. And then I'm seeing all these, like REI ads and backpacking and all kinds of things that are showing up on my feed. And I'm sure that some of you have experienced that as well. The accounts that you follow, there's ways that people can advertise based on, if you follow certain big accounts, they can put ads in front of you or content in front of you that is similar to other things that you've liked or engaged with. Or if you have certain accounts that you like to engage with a lot. So maybe you're following them and you always like their posts. They're more likely to show up on your newsfeed because Facebook is kind of saying, hey, I think you like this. I think you're really interested in this. So it's probably going to be a better experience for you if I put this content in front of you. You're kind of telling the platform, I like this, show me more of this when you're engaging on it. And again, it's not just Facebook, it's the other platforms that work that way as well. And then same with online communities if you're in different groups. I know I'm using Facebook a lot as an example, but this is similar on Instagram. It's YouTube as well. YouTube isn't really a social media platform, but there's an algorithm there as well that also looks at your behavior and will show you things that are similar to what you've looked at before. So you'll notice if you start listening to videos or looking at videos on something, you're going to start seeing more videos like that or more ads like that. So, how are people actually using social media? So I know I've been talking for a while and we're kind of halfway through. I would be curious for all of you to share in the chat, how do you use social media? What are you using it for? What kinds of things, what platforms are you on, and what do you use social media for?
I'll be happy to jump in.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can do. Go ahead.
And Karen, I appreciate your talk. Social media, so I'll just make 2 brief points and then hopefully we can pass it along to someone else to weigh in. First, I'm concerned kids are on social media so much. And like back in the day where the lunchrooms were really noisy places, now all the kids are just on the cell phones texting the person sitting next to them, and I just laugh. For me,
Yeah.
social media has two main purposes. I keep up with family, but I also admit most of it's just bragging, and I tire of that. You got new jewelry or a purse or a car or whatever, but some people are very genuine. But we all like to show off, and that's okay. And hopefully, it doesn't make people feel bad when you read about that. And then the second thing is I do publish research and connect with people nationally and internationally, and it's just been a boon. I get to see people all over the world that I could never get a hold of, and I get to talk to top researchers from in the past week I've talked to Sharon Merriam, if you know who she is, and Denny Goya, and I never could do that before. And now with social media, wow, the world's a small place. And my
Yeah.
friend said, E.T.L. Dror, the top cognitive scientist in the world, he'll talk to me on LinkedIn, but 50 years ago or even 30 years ago, if I needed information, I had to go into the physical library, like at the University of Illinois, and I was in a Mord, it's the third largest academic library in the U.S., and you'd spend hours and hours down there and see so little, and there's just information overload today.
Yeah. The information overload is for real. Does anybody else want to chime in and share before we just that? Kim says, I don't use social media at all. Fighting. Well, so I feel like I've been hounding on the negative aspects of it, but as as I've shared, as David shared, and I'm seeing in the chat, says checking in and following family and friends. The badminton team and CrossFit classes have an Instagram page to communicate events and promote groups. Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I have been focused on the risks, but it almost seems like, when cars were first invented, I mean, how many people get in traffic accidents? But look at what we're able to do because we have cars and we're able to have transportation. So I definitely, it is a very nuanced conversation because it's not going away, and it allows us to do amazing things that we would never be able to do if it didn't exist. But when kids are using it, and I think we just have to understand how it works. Does anybody else want to chime in before I keep going? I'm going to open up for, I'm close to the end. So yeah, definitely embrace, but use responsible, because, and the reason that I share a lot of this is, again, the platforms are always changing, but the other thing is that kids aren't always aware of the fact that these platforms work this way. So it's really important that we educate the parents and the kids so that they understand, should kids be using the certain apps before a certain age, or how should supervision look, what is appropriate, and what's the appropriate length of time and activities that kids should be using, and are you being, is your opinion changing because of your interaction on social media? Because maybe you don't realize that you're kind of getting sucked into certain groups, or because maybe you saw something that upset you, and again, you're just seeing this limited picture. I was gonna kind of get into that in just a few minutes, but like we call it, it's referred to as the Instagram highlight reel of other people's lives. You see the parts of their lives that they're sharing, and you're not seeing all the other things. I know that anybody this kind of happens with marketing, where they show the before and after. They show the before and then they show the after, and they don't show all the hard work in between. And that's something that concerns me a lot with kids, because there's this, we're kind of losing that sense of resilience and understanding of what work went in from getting here to there. And there's this almost suggestion that there should be immediate gratification. And that concerns me a lot, because then people start to have this belief that if I don't get, this, whatever it is that I'm working for right away, then I'm, just going to quit, or just not really understanding what it takes. And being an executive functioning person, being somebody who talks a lot about that, being able to self-regulate and think into the future and envision what steps you need to take in order to be successful and get to that end goal. Well, if you don't understand those steps, you're going to get off track. So that's something that concerns me a lot. Again, I've seen this work for good and bad. Good in that people are able to connect with professionals that are maybe outside of their area to support them, but bad in that we've got to control the information that kids are seeing. And that Instagram highlight reel of not really seeing what took to get to the end result, or not really seeing the complete picture, is something that I find it impacting myself all the time. Like, I find myself getting sucked in and feeling the FOMO all the times. Some things that I also wanted to share a little bit about that I researched earlier this year, that users are engaging with social media platforms and online content for things like peer support, social interactions, information, and advice, kind of like you all shared. A lot of people just use it to keep in touch with friends and family, but a lot of people are also using it for information and advice, which is, again, I offer things like that. And people are also using it for mental health advice. It's been referred to as TikTok therapy, where people are finding these online communities and there's support, or they're getting information about mental health. Anything that's about mental health is huge on social media. TikTok there's a lot of information on TikTok about mental health. And traditional models of getting mental health services. So things like you can do telehealth depending on licensure and what's available. There are certain platforms that do offer mental health counseling and things like that for both kids and adults, and then in-person therapy. So these things, those traditional models, are regulated by state licensure requirements, but tend to be less accessible because of cost and logistical constraints. And so people are going to these social medias that are focused on mental health, or that are sharing, their education and giving parenting advice. And it tends to be lower cost and highly accessible, because if you meet somebody who's in another state than you, and you can connect with them online, then you don't have to worry about travel. But the problem is that those communities are not regulated. So there might be some people who are really amazing, but they're also, and I've witnessed this firsthand, some people who are sharing some information that's not accurate and that is harmful. So that is where, one, we have to be careful about this ourselves when we're vetting our own information and getting information for just our own personal development, or maybe professional development, as how we are supporting kids, but also knowing that kids are doing this as well, knowing that our parents are going to some of these people and getting information. Something else too that we need to think about when it comes to special ed, I have interacted with people who are really good with understanding policy requirements, but I've also interacted with people who are, think they know a lot about special ed policy, but don't, or don't realize that we have very different regulations state by state, or even in just how it's implemented in different communities within the same state. So that's where it can be challenging, because sometimes when you have these big communities of people who are from all over the world, that information a lot of times gets lost in translation. And, we have parents who come into IEP meetings armed with this information that they found from wherever. It's then, that just sometimes can cause an adversarial reaction. So I think that we need to be really on top of those relationships, to be aware that sometimes people are getting that information from the outside, but the more we can build those relationships with our parents and our communities, the more they're likely going to be coming to us for information, or we can set some expectations that, yes, you might be getting information from outside sources, but it's different in every state and every district. And some of that information you're getting from the outside might not, those people might not necessarily know all of those things that have to do with compliance. With the mental health, again, it's, as we've kind of covered today, it's not going away. Mental health content is huge, and it's likely to increase based on just what the statistics have shown us as far as what's trending and the rate at which these platforms are growing. We also, something that's very interesting, thinking about people with social anxiety, that these tend to be appealing, because if you have social anxiety and you get nervous in a group that's where there's a lot of things going on and it's overstimulating, then a community where you can interact with people online might make you feel a little safer, and you feel like you can, connect with people who are like you, where, especially if with groups where people sometimes feel like there's not a lot of people like them in their local community, they're going to be likely to seek support from these online communities, which can be a good thing in certain cases, as long as they're getting accurate information and that support is delivered ethically. So I think that's really important, especially with, we're working with students who are autistic or have ADHD or have anxiety or things that are going to impact their social interactions. Anything that has to do with neurodiversity, that is a huge trend right now. And there's a lot of information going on or going around about that. And again, not all of it is rooted in evidence-based practices. So as a result, because the platforms are growing, because there is an incentive for people who are creating this content to continue to produce this. It's, people start businesses, people become influencers, and so there's big incentives. It's very appealing for people, so it's likely to continue. And it's definitely likely to continue in the area of supporting mental health. And the good thing is that there are qualified professionals who are using these platforms to spread health information. Some of the platforms are coming out with, different things where they have to be verified. YouTube, for example, someone that I follow on YouTube, there is something that he has on his channel that says he is a licensed health professional. So there are things that are coming out, because I think these companies are realizing some of the issues and know that we need to tighten up. But there's still an element that a lot of these things are highly unregulated. So we just need to know what's happening and then think about how we can start taking steps to protect those people who we're supporting. Again, it continues to be a risk for those vulnerable populations due to some of the cognitive bias that can happen with online influencers or even online predators. There's, again, not always clear ethical guidelines in some of these communities and ways to control misleading information. And we also know that social media use there is a chance that it can be addictive and that it can be correlated with things like depression and anxiety, even though a lot of times people are going on social media for solutions for depression and anxiety. Sometimes it actually can make it worse. So obviously the benefits, we've talked about the benefits, that you can find products and services that would interest you. You can connect with others. You can stay in touch. You can find ways to engage with people that you never would be able to engage with, and network and connect with people. And entertainment. I mean, I found some, there's I didn't think to share his information, but there's his name is Michael McCreary. He is an autistic comedian, and he has a book, and he has a social media page. And sometimes I just scroll it when I, am in a bad mood and want to cheer myself up, because it's just really funny. You should definitely take a look at his page. But obviously, there's a lot of people who are using it ethically and getting life-changing services and information and content and entertainment into people's hands. So really just the question that I want to leave us with. Oh, whoops, one more slide. Oh, I wanted to share that I met my husband online. I met him in it was one of the dating sites, but so obviously there have been some benefits for me as well. But the main thing is where I think that sometimes this gets lost, aside from all the things that I've already shared with young people today, a lot of times just the way that they interact with people their age and connect has changed. And it's almost like this thing that was meant to enhance our lives and be something that can improve our in-person interactions and facilitate them has become a replacement. And that was never what it was intended to do. And I share the dating situation because I remember when I met my husband and I was talking to other people who were doing the online dating thing. It was like the whole interaction happens online. And I would say the whole point is that you connect and then you go in person. It's just a tool and we have to know how to use the tool. And when we think about how kids are using it, a lot of times some of them are using it very well. There's a, texting each other or using a Snapchat to coordinate an in-person get together. That's great. They're getting a chance to interact with peers their age. They are thinking strategically and planning together and collaborating. That's what we want them to be doing. But then there's other people who are only communicating online and never getting that in-person interaction and never having that real connection and those real life experiences. So I think that's the shift and the distinction that we want to really take home for the kids, is that this is a tool, it's an enhancement, it's not a replacement. So yeah, so now I'm on my final slide, and I do have in the chat, you can download this presentation. The slide after this, I have some content and some podcast episodes and some resources that I recommend that are just good information on this topic. And I've talked a lot about how there are ethical content creators, and then there are people who, are sharing information that's not as good. And so I wanted to just highlight some interviews that I did with some people who are doing some really good work online and putting information into the hands of parents and families and really helping. So yeah, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'd love to hear from the group about your experiences and your thoughts on how we can support our students, our community, and staff to be good consumers of social media and to use it for its good, use it for the benefits that it provides us. So anybody can open up or share in the chat. And yes, I'm looking at the comments in here. David saying that TikTok has a lot of experts. Yeah. They don't always tell you when they're promoting a product too, that they're getting paid for it. Yeah. And then
I'll be happy to jump in.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we get someone else to respond. And of course, I work in a juvenile justice facility. Everything you do online is probably recorded. I've seen lots of
Yep.
people convicted kids because they've used social media to plan crimes.
Mhm.
And then there's a search warrant from Verizon or AT&T or someone else, and all that history exists on a computer server somewhere. But besides the criminal element, kids need to know everything they do is probably online. And I think some big issues I see in school districts is sexting. And
Oh, yeah.
I laugh that a lot of kids will no longer change in a locker room because they don't want to be seen in their underwear or bra or whatever, but they'll send naked pictures of themselves that'll appear online forever. And it's just it's a major problem, and I think teachers and parents have largely lost that battle, and I'm not sure how that's going to be resolved, and it's not, of course, just in my district. It's very much a national problem.
Yeah. There's a lot of thoughts. I know that some some people think that there should be legislation. Some people think that it should be on the parents to be the ones deciding what kids are and aren't able to see, which, I mean, really it is on the parents now because there isn't a lot of top-down legislation for this, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the answer is.
And I'm going to speak up. I've got 4 kids that are 21 to 14 right now at home. My oldest is actually an influencer. So listening to all of this, it's interesting. She actually makes more money than I do teaching with what she does online.
Which is
she-
amazing that people can do that and they should be able to
Yeah.
do it.
So primarily she's a dancer. That's where it kind of all started and photographers started reaching out. But, you know, as much as you hear a lot of people that get hysterical over the dangers, but I would say within the communities that are online, the groups of kids that are talking, especially within the big influencer groups, they're pretty supportive of looking out for predators. They're pretty well informed. There are a ton of, as much as people think that, yes, there are definitely accounts that aren't monitored by parents, but I would say primarily, like even until she was like 20, I was still on her account pretty regularly. And there are a lot of moms, even some dads that are also on the accounts, monitoring what's happening. And I've had lots of conversations through that with other parents, pretty well aware. And the kids are more informed than a lot of adults assume they are, at least when they're in the upper teens. I think it's the younger kids that I have more concerns with because they don't always see, and yeah, you are right. You know, we've seen lots of things with younger kids trying to emulate what they see older content creators doing, and they don't realize hours and hours of training, lots of videos, lots of connections go into that. You know, some of the girls will get upset because they'll be like, oh, you're so lucky. And it's like, you know that I train, 40 hours a week. What are
Yeah.
you doing? And they don't always see that part.
Yeah, I think that before, well, and I think that the other thing that you said was that you were involved and you were on the account and there were conversations. And so I think that's part of what needs to be happening is that we want kids to be able to do things like that and learn and I mean, I'm sure she's learned so many different skills about running a business, being disciplined, working hard from doing that.
We both learned marketing on our own from
Yeah.
scratch.
And I mean, that's
You did
amazing.
it.
That's, yeah. And that's an example of like what's possible when you have a platform and when you can do it the right way. So thank you for sharing. I think that's, it's a good example of how to do it the right way.
Yeah, no, and I think it's just a matter of, schools maybe to put out information in terms of like, hey, check this. These are tricks and tips to just kind of monitor what your kids are doing. And, like little things like realizing that kids can have 5 accounts at the same time. I've run into parents where I'm like, hey, do you know your kid has this? No, they don't have this account. I'm like, yes, they do. Let me show you. Because the kids can swipe out of one account and hop into another super quickly.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's interesting is that if you are an influencer and you're doing it successfully, you are probably way more informed than someone who is consuming content but not creating it. So in that situation, I think sometimes the issue is more people who aren't creating content and don't fully understand how the platform works. And if you're involved and you're educated, then it could potentially make you a better consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So David is sharing that policies on social media are not local school district, but statewide. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that there's definitely different policies on phones and social media as well. But yeah, school related social media accounts typically would have to be shared with, someone at the leadership level. And a designated person who is assigned to handling it. I know that typically there's someone who is, designed or designated to be the moderator so that it's very clear what your protocol is for responding to comments and things like that. All right, well, we're close to 8 o'clock. So as I said before, you're welcome to download the presentation. It's in the chat. It's all the way at the top. If you want to scroll all the way to I don't know if, let me share it again. So this will have all the information that I shared as far as statistics, and then also I shared too some other content and some people who some of these are interviews that I've done on my platform, but also just some people who are, like I said, a lot of the work that I've been able to do has been because of social media. So I think that it's definitely, it's important that we understand the good and the bad and use it as a tool. All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to stop recording.